Hi, it's Dustin with Name the Unknown, here to just share a little bit about the evangelism training that we have been doing lately. With Name the Unknown, my mission basically is to disciple Christian men through training in rigorous Bible study, evangelism, and apologetics. So we're going to kind of just talk about the evangelism portion of that today, and you'll get a little sneak peek into this in-person evangelism training that I have been leading here in the Omaha area. So how this came about basically is we were doing evangelism through the summer. We were going downtown, just sharing the gospel. It's gotten colder, and so with that, people don't typically want to stop and talk to strangers. So we were shooting ideas around on how to spend our winter and what to do instead of evangelism, but still kind of in that realm to equip ourselves. And basically we landed, at least for a while here in the winter, we're going to be doing just some training, some role playing, and just kind of backtracking a little bit and saying, okay, we did some of the evangelism. Could we have done it better? Or how can we be a little bit more bold? Some of the newer guys that are coming out, how can we push them out a little bit more into being more the front runners of the evangelism rather than just, kind of watching. So we're going back and doing a little bit of training, which I think has been awesome. So the first thing we did was the basics. What is the gospel? If you're doing evangelism, you should know what the gospel is. So we did spend 1 week just going over what the gospel is. Now, this was basically just sharing a little bit of the fruit of a very long study I had actually done as part of a Bible study, where we spent months going through what is the gospel and how do we present the gospel. And so I shared just a little bit of kind of what the results were of that study. So to do this kind of thing for yourself, if you want to just read through Acts, Acts is a history of the early Christian church and the apostles just sharing the gospel. So if you want to know kind of what a biblical gospel presentation looks like, read the book of Acts, and especially those sections, where an apostle or just a Christian is giving a presentation of the gospel. Just stop and study that section. Also, 1 Corinthians 15, when we were doing our Bible study, we found that this was a foundational passage where Paul is laying out. He says, I would remind you, brothers, of the gospel I preached to you. And then he tells them what the gospel is that he preached to them. So, you can look at 1 Corinthians 15, look through Acts, especially, specifically, you can do Acts 2, verse 14 through 40. We looked at Acts 3, 11 through 26. You can look at Acts 17, verse 16 through 34. So I won't dive a ton into, what the gospel is. You can go and read that. But what we did this most recent time is we started looking at the Socratic method. So, okay, now we know what the gospel is. Let's move on and let's look at how can we start presenting the gospel. And the very first sort of tactic or method I thought would be good to introduce is just the Socratic method. So the Socratic method is named after Socrates, if you don't know. It's an ancient Greek philosopher. And this is essentially the art of asking questions, to navigate a conversation or to make a point. So why use this method? Well, I think this method is a way to show that you care. I think it's best not to think of this as a trick or even to think of it as a method, this is just a tool I'm going to use to get to what I really want to say. But if you're using this naturally and authentically, it actually shows that you care. By asking someone a question, then it shows that you care what they actually think, right? Another huge benefit of this is that it takes the burden off of you. Someone comes up and says, well, what are you guys out here discussing? You say something simple like, well, we're Christians, we're out here sharing the gospel with people. Tell me, what do you believe? Boom, right away you flipped it on them. And but you're not asking them to defend something that they aren't an expert on. You're asking them about something they're an expert on themselves and what they believe. So you're not saying, why don't you explain to me all this theology? And you're not asking them to explain anything they don't already know. They should know what they believe. And so it's if you're just using it authentically, it's going to take the burden off of you. It can sort of put a little cool water on potentially an otherwise heated conversation, and just ask them to share what they believe. This is also going to give you the maximum amount of information to work with. So at some point, you are going to likely have to disagree with someone who's coming up in an evangelism scenario, and if more than likely they're not going to agree with everything you're saying. And so at some point you're going to have to cross swords with these guys. It's not just always questions. But before crossing swords with them, you want the maximum amount of information to work with. You don't want to straw man this other person's view. So to present a straw man argument would be to sort of knock down a position that they don't actually hold. So if you're actually asking them, what do you believe, you can make sure when you do need to attack, you're actually attacking what they believe and what they're saying, and not just what you think they believe. Okay? So it gives you the maximum amount of information to work with. So that's a great benefit of this Socratic method. And this is an easy way to stay in control of the conversation, to lead the conversation by just asking them questions. So that's the method essentially. A video like this, it's tough because a lot of what we did in person in the training is actually doing live role playing. So you can't get that kind of a thing with the video. But I can say if this is something you want to practice, our first practice was simply I would say some things. Let's say I would just say something about my day, or I'd say something about what I believe, just in general. I'd just talk about my drive to the coffee shop that morning. And, I'd talk for a decent amount of time, talk for maybe, a minute, 2 minutes. And then I'd have the person who I'm training, they would summarize what I said. I just said a bunch of stuff. Now condense that down for me and basically summarize what I've said. And then ask if you got it correct. Okay? So what I hear you saying is blah, 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 blah. Am I getting you correct? And we just did that for a few different things, just really benign things. The guy I was training told me about some things he enjoys reading. And I listened, and then I summarized back. Sounds like you enjoy reading for this reason and that reason. And you've, been enjoying reading this since a certain age in the past, and that's brought you to where you are today. Is that correct? Yeah, that's pretty much what I said. Awesome. Now we can move on. And so it's the real basics. It sounds so basic, but when you're out there with a stranger, it's something you can forget, is to just listen, ask them a question, listen, summarize what they said, and then ask if you've got it correct. So that was basically the first thing, the first bit of practice we did. And then the next thing we did, so we just added on to that. Okay, so I'm going to summarize what they've said, ask if I've got it correct, and then the next thing we started practicing is asking them why. So why do you like reading so much, right? So I've summarized what you've said. So you like reading this kind of novel. You've been reading for this long. You read about this many books per year. Awesome. I've summarized it. I have it correct. But now explain to me why. And that's just getting a little bit more into this heated type territory. Now you're not just talking about information, but you're talking about motivations. So you're kind of moving into that motivation territory and some of their actual underlying beliefs. And so just practice that with someone. If you want to try practicing evangelism, it can be anyone. I don't care if they're a Christian or not. Just ask someone, hey, I'm going to ask you some random questions. I just basically want you to give me a decent amount of information for about a minute, 2 minutes. I want you to just talk to me about anything. And I'm going to summarize it and see if I got it correct. Okay, practice that. And then ask them why. And when we were doing this in practice, it was actually surprising how after asking why, we actually just started talking. We sort of forgot we were practicing, and we were just talking. Oh, well, and you'd be surprised how natural the questions will come to you after this sort of a point. So that's where we're at so far in the training. I hope this benefits people somewhat. I know it's tough not actually being there in person. If you have any questions or you want any more info, please contact me. You can message me. Drop me a comment. You can email me, dustin@nametheunknown.com. And yeah, I'd love to help you out as you practice some of these tools. So thanks for listening. God bless.